This section is going to talk about the materials for Story Champs, a multi-tiered language intervention curriculum. There are 3 types of kits that people may have. First, there's a Story Champs 1.0. That comes in a purple and a green box. Second, there is Story Champs 2.0. It's recently released and it comes in a large yellow box. And for those people who purchase Story Champs 1.0, there's a booster pack that gives them all the materials that come with Story Champs 2.0, but in a separate little pack. Okay, and if you don't already have the either Story Champs 2.0 or Story Champs 1.0 plus the booster pack, I suggest you get it soon. There's so many things that you can do with the new materials. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the materials that are included. These are the storybook, illustrations, story starter cards, icons, story games, master lesson plans, add-on lesson plans, and printables. So these are all the materials that come in 2.0. You see the boxes at the top, then you've got the storybook. So all of the stories that we have written are included in this little storybook. There are illustrations. The champ checks, this green and yellow boards, are now dry erase boards. They're sturdy little things. And we have icons, of course, and there are also icons for informational text and connection, sparkle, and new terms. Here are the story games, okay? And story starter cards are a new part of the Story Champs 2.0. And at the bottom here, you have a flash drive, and this has all the extras in it. And there are so many things on that flash drive, and it's incredibly valuable to users. These are the materials that come in the booster pack if you happen to have the Story Champs 1.0 in the purple and the green box. You can add on this Story Champs booster pack so you can have the other materials that are newly developed by Language Dynamics Group. Of course, these were added because new research has become available, and we want our users to be able to have all the best, latest, and greatest materials to improve students' language skills. So the storybook. In the storybook, there are 2 levels of stories: classic stories and blitz stories. The purpose of the classic stories is to teach the basic story structure and enhanced story structure. In the basic story structure, we have character, problem, feeling, action, ending. And in the enhanced story structure at level B is character, setting, problem, feeling, action, ending, and end feeling. And those classic stories do not have vocabulary words embedded in them, but they can be added later if necessary. Now, the blitz stories all have special sparkle words or vocabulary words that are embedded in the stories to enhance the targeting intervention instruction that's going on in the schools. So, for example, you can target the vocabulary words, you can target language complexity, and additional elements as the levels go up. So there are 10 levels of blitz stories, only 2 levels of classic stories. In total, there are 24 stories, 12 classic and 12 blitz. Here's an example of a classic level A story. Right here, you can tell that it's a classic story, okay? Here it says what level it is, and that indicates what story structure you should be teaching. Down here is the character icon, the problem icon, feeling, action, and ending. Okay. Now the story is short, and if you notice, there are not any bold or gray or black words in these stories, but you can target the story structure, the linguistic complexity, because, then, and when. And here are vocabulary targets if you wanted to put those into the story and target them. Here's a blitz story level A. See, you know it's a blitz story over here on the left, and it's a level A. It's about the same amount of words, but there are gray bold words and there are black bold words. These are the vocabulary that are embedded in the blitz story. Here in this box, you have the vocabulary words that are in the story and the definitions that you can use to teach the kids. We use child-friendly definitions and have them included there for your for quick reference. These words, gulped and delectable, the black bold words, they have contextual support in them, and the contextual support is italicized in the box and in this story. So these are the words that would be really great to teach kids how to infer the meaning of words. Notice here there's another icon. When we work with vocabulary, we use this icon called the sparkle icon. Here are the illustrations that would go with that story. Note that there are 5 illustrations, 5 story grammar icons, and there are 2 sparkle icons. And in that particular story, the words gulped and delectable were in the last part of the story. Here's a level B story. This is also classic. You can see right over here. Okay, and the vocabulary words are here in this list, but not already embedded in the story. If you do want to use one of those vocabulary words, you should just choose maybe 2 or 3 at most and pre-plan what the definitions are and pre-embed them in the story so that you're prepared when you're teaching the kids. Notice also that there are 2 additional story grammar icons here. There's the setting and the end feeling. This aligns with the level B story. Here's a level B story for Blitz. Okay, it's the same story structure. The icons along the bottom are character, setting, problem, feeling, action, ending, and end feeling. But the vocabulary words are actually in the story this time. And there are many of them. The gray bolded ones are words that are not supported by context, so you would have to teach them explicitly. And the black bolded words are supported by context, so you can help the kids use clues in the story to figure out what the meaning of the word is. And of course, those are italicized here for you, and there's the sparkle icon. These would be the set of pictures or illustrations you would use, and notice that there is a setting and an end feeling icon with level B. A level C story has causal connections highlighted. Those are the bolded words in black. Notice that there are also gray bolded words. Those are the sparkle words that you might have taught during level A or B Blitz stories. So they're still in there and they could be practiced, but the main target of using a level C story would be the because and so that, the causal connections. And this icon here is called a connection icon, and they look like little Legos because kids like to use Legos to connect things. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is starting in level C, we've added a few more icons, and there are lessons to be able to teach kids what these icons are. This here is a plan. This question mark is a plan icon, and this here is a consequence icon. And these should be added when kids have the level B story structure pretty well established and are ready to move to more complex stories. The consequence and the ending are sometimes confusing, so there is a lesson in the new lesson plans to clarify how those are different. Here would be a set of illustrations. Notice these are the same stories of Bryn at these levels, and the same set of illustrations are used, but there are more icons for levels C through I. So here's another, level D. Again, it's the same story, and what's targeted here in bold black is the temporal connections, the after and when. It's a Blitz story, and it has all the icons with the plan and the consequence included. In a level E story, the target here are modifiers, and they're mostly pre-noun and adverbs to modify the verbs and nouns in the stories. They're adjectives and adverbs to modify the nouns and the verbs in the story. And we use the sparkle icon to reflect the modifiers that need to be in the story. It helps to remind the kids that there's a special word in that story. And notice the icons are the same as they were for level C, with the plan and the consequence included. This is a level F. The only difference here is that we've combined both temporal and causal connections, and those are the bolded black words in the story. Again, you'll see the gray bolded words. Those are all the sparkle, the vocabulary that can be practiced as you're working on these words. In level G, the targets are modifiers and causal connections. Level H, the targets are modifiers and temporal connections. Level I, The targets are modifiers, causal, and temporal connections. You've got all of them. And then finally, you're at level J. This is the last level. It's a very complex story. It has 2 episodes in them. So if you notice at the icons at the bottom, we have added now a red star looking icon. That one is actually for the unresolved problem. It's red like a problem, but it's also the same shape as the consequence at the end that's green. So you have a red consequence that didn't actually solve the problem, so it's an unresolved problem. And then you have another feeling, another plan, a second attempt with the 2 stars, right here, the 2 stars, and then consequence and ending. And then this is the end feeling. And sometimes these 2 are in a different order. And here they are with the illustrations. Now, the Blitz stories come with actual 8 cards of the illustrations, but up until, or for levels A through I, you would only use cards 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8 because there's a single episode in those stories and you only need 5 cards to illustrate that. But once you get to level J, you need all 8 illustration cards because it has a double episode. And notice in this story, the unresolved problem is her candy bar is still melted. So this is the unresolved problem. It's the consequence of the first episode and the problem of the second episode. And here at the end, you have the actual consequence that works and the ending and end feeling. Okay, all with the 2.0 and the booster pack, you get a jump drive that has a digital display of those images. This is handy for classrooms so that they can display all the photos or the illustrations on a smart board or some other type using a projector and a computer. The materials are also touchscreen, so they work on an iPad or a tablet as well. And you'll see here, you've got basic story structure for level A, enhanced story structure for level B, enhanced plus story structure for level C through I, and advanced story structure for level J. There are some other components on here, like the story starter cards and the passage icons and pattern blocks, but those will be explained a little bit more later. So when you click on this one, I went into level B, the enhanced story structure, then you have an index of all of the illustrations or stories that are available. So I might click on Daniel's Ruined Writing. And this is what you would see. Here's a set of 5 pictures that's appropriate for the level B stories. And notice that there's an icon for setting and an end feeling. And we also have sparkle and connection icons there if those are going to be part of the lesson. And as you implement the lesson, you would click over here at icons only and move on to the next phase where the icons are showing but the illustrations have been removed. And then as you continue through the lesson, you may click on remove icon where you would see the illustrations or the different stories. Okay, so I mentioned the story starter cards. This is new in the Story Champs 2.0. This is to help kids generate fictional stories. There are actual 30 cards in the pack. These are just examples of them. They're fun. They're single card, silly pictures, and they're designed to encourage children to generate their own stories so that they're more independent in generating stories. These can also be used for writing and for inferencing, for teaching inferences, and many other things. Those are also in the digital materials. Okay, story games. In the small group lessons of Story Champs, you need to have kids play story games while one person is telling the story. There are really 4 types, but these here are story bingo cards, story cubes, story sticks. There's also story gestures, which I'm going to show you on the next slide, and champ checks. And to play the story game, the students or the children, they listen to the storyteller tell each part of the story. And when they hear that part, they point to the icon on the bingo, or they could place a token on that bingo card, that particular piece. Or they would turn the cube to that side so it's showing up. Okay, so the part that has the character icon on it would be showing, indicating that the child understood what the child was telling. They could also hold up the stick that goes to it. Okay. One of the kind of rule of thumb with the games is sometimes it's confusing to know how many pieces gives everybody. You usually only play 1 or 2 games during a small group intervention, and every kid, the right pieces, every kid except for the storyteller, every child except for the storyteller has to have something, has to have every icon. So if you use the bingo card, each kid just gets a bingo card. Each kid would get 1 cube. But with the story sticks, each child would need all 5 story sticks. 1 that has character, 1 that has problem, 1 that has feeling, 1 that has action, 1 that has ending, and so forth. So, and we encourage that the interventionist and the other children who are listening to the story have the games to play, while the other one is telling the story. Now, the other game that can be played is story gestures. This is played in the large group instruction as well as anytime during the small group individual retell phases. We only have the gestures for the levels A and B icons. So character, you would put your hand on your head when you would hear somebody say that part of the story. For the setting, we put our 2 hands together with our fingertips together, kind of in a slanted roof or slanted triangle forming a roof or a house. Thumbs down, that's easy for the problem. For feeling, we use a finger pointed to the side of your eye, moving downward like a tear is falling. Okay. You could also put your right hand over your heart if you'd like to for the feeling. The action, we have a closed right hand in a closed fist, and then we move it across our body, opening the hand. Alternatively, you could just raise your hand and open up your fingers as you raise them up, straight up above your head. For the ending, we would do a thumbs up, looks just like the icons, and then the end feeling, we put fingers on the sides of our cheeks and smile. And the way you play it is as you're listening for the storyteller to tell that part of the story, as you hear it, you silently make that gesture. So it's indicating that you have understood, or the child has understood that they heard that part of the story. Okay, for large group or for small groups that are larger than 4 students, we recommend using the champ checks. This is in place of the story games when you're doing the individual retell. In champ checks, it's a peer tutoring procedure where they go into pairs and each child takes turn retelling the story or telling a story or a passage. If you see over here, we have information retell champ checks as well. And the listener checks off with a dry erase board all of the parts that they told, and if their partner needs help, they can help their partner make sure that they get all of the parts of the story. And when the first storyteller has finished, then they switch, and the second person gets to tell the story, and the first person becomes the champ checker. The 2.0 and the booster comes with the new dry erase champ check boards that are for the narratives for levels A through J, but the champ checks for the information retell are on the jump drive and that can be printed as needed. All right, the next pieces are master lesson plans. As you see from this slide, they're color-coded. The large group lesson plans are purple, small group lesson plans are yellow, and individual lesson plans are green. We also have add-on lesson plans that are blue. I'm not going to go into too much detail here about the add-on lesson plans, but they can be added to most every type of master lesson plan depending on what your students are ready to be learning. Okay, so in this slide you can see that there are many options. So the table of contents for large group lesson plans has all the different types of structures and genre and targets that you would need, and so you can use the table of contents to make your decision about what you're going to target. Same with the small group. They're not exactly identical because there are some small group lessons that probably aren't needed for large group. And then here they are for the individual master lesson plans and then the add-on lesson plans. So here's some examples. Here is a basic story structure for large group. What I want to point what I want to point out is how to use this materials box. At the top here, it tells you what kind of story you need, a classic or a blitz level A from the Storybook. It also tells you what illustrations to get. If you're using the illustration cards, select the cards from corresponding story. But for blitz stories, you need to remember to only use cards 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8 rather than all 8 of the cards. That would be too difficult, too many cards. If you're using the digital presentation, you would just click on the level A button and select the corresponding story that you want. Notice that there is just the 5 icons: character, problem, feeling, action, ending. And then it tells you that you need the champ checks erase boards and you need a level A. Also up here in the corner of this materials box, it says consider add-on lessons 58 through 62. So all of the master lesson plans give you a suggestion about other add-on lesson plans that will work with that lesson. Here are the steps in the master lesson plan. And the reason why they're semi-scripted like this is because these reflect the active ingredients and the critical components of the lesson. And you should not change or eliminate any of these steps. These are what makes it effective. The other thing that's important about these steps is that as from step 1 to step 4, you're increasing children's independence in storytelling. There are more supports at the beginning and less supports at the end. And that's intentional. We need to fade those supports so children do not become prompt dependent. So then you model the story with the story illustrations out, and then you review, you teach the icons if they're needed. You don't always, once you've taught the students the names of the parts, the story grammar parts, and the icons, you don't need to keep repeating that every single time. That's why it says as needed there. In step 2, the teacher would retell the story again, and the children would play story gestures so that they are listening very carefully to each part of the story. And then in team retell, the students are working together, and the teacher's asking questions and getting the children to answer the questions, and then having the whole group respond together what the parts of the story. And finally is the partner retell. That's when the champ checks are used, and the partners take turns doing it themselves. You can also see that there's a remember box over here with the yellow. There's a 2-step prompting procedure, and you want to make corrections immediately. And those are reminded on every master lesson. So here's a basic story structure for a small group lesson. Notice at the top, it covers both retell and personal stories. Okay. It also tells, there's also an enhanced story structure lesson that would be appropriate for like level B stories. And the major difference here is that the basic story structure has the 5 icons, and the enhanced story structure has the 7 icons with the setting and end feeling. So in this small group lesson, the procedures, there is fading of visual supports as well. You start with more support in steps 1 and 2 with a team retell, and then you go into individual retell. And in the first individual retell, the children have the picture, or the child has the pictures and the icons to help them. In individual retell 2, it's just the icons. Then you convert into personal stories. You leave the icons on the table and you ask one child, has something like that ever happened to you? And then leave the icons so that that child can tell his or her own personal story. And then you would remove the icons when the last person is telling their own personal story. Here's a individual lesson plan. Again, this is a basic story structure, retell and personal. Some things I want to point out is that the same visual material fading of that occurs in this lesson too. In step 3, the child retells the story by themselves, but with icons and illustrations. Then with icons only. Then without illustrations or icons, they're fully removed. Then in step 6, you bring the icons back and help the child produce their own story, and you would use sticky notes to draw their pictures of what they're telling you. Kids love that. And then they would retell their own story using the sticky notes and the icons available. And then you would fade and only have them tell their own story with just the icons. And then the last step is that they retell their own story with nothing. So you've taught them how to retell the story and then generate their own story and be able to do it independently without the visual support. One of the differences with the one-on-one lessons is that there's a step about WH questions. We included that because many kids who need a one-on-one have difficulty answering WH questions, so it's an additional step. The interesting thing about it is that we use those in the small group and the large group lessons as prompts for our two-step prompting, and also in the team retell. And so we don't need it as a special step. Okay, this is an example of an add-on lesson that we might do with a Blitz story because it has Blitz vocabulary words from context. And this lesson is to teach children how to use the clues in the story to figure out the meaning of the words. Notice that it tells you what icons you need, and that there's also a word journal that's in the printable section of the flash drive. It tells you that you need a Blitz story, and here are the lesson plans for large group, small group, and individual that this would work with. It tells you where the words and the clues are. All right, here, the last thing we need to talk about are the printables. The flash drive with the Story Champs 2.0 or with the booster pack has tons of extra things. One of them is the take-home activities. We have take-home activities that align with level A and B stories, and they can be printed out and sent home with kids as a little homework activity. There are also classroom center activities where you can put sequencing materials in a center so that kids can do those and sequence the cards on their own. There's writing organizers. With a new Story Champs 2.0, the writing lessons are integrated into the master lesson plans, but you need some reproducibles so that they could be printed and given to each of the kids when they need them. The same applies for the information lessons, and we use these things called pattern blocks to help give a visual structure to the information passages, similar to the illustrations in the narrative story. Okay, we also have information notes, and these would be for older elementary students, maybe second, third grade, who have the ability to write quickly during a listening task on information so that they can take notes and help them remember. Word journals are used to write down the definitions and synonyms of words, and as well as sentences, and then the Spot the Sparkle posters. These are all printables on the flash drive. There are actually 136 Spot the Sparkle posters, and they feature all the words in the Blitz stories plus synonyms. I'll show you an example in a second. Okay, here's a copy of the word journals. So you see you have the word, synonyms, definitions, and example sentences. I like to put these in a little book for each of the kids and staple them and put their names on them, and then when they come for the intervention, they have this collection of books. I also can send them back whenever there's some free time that they could work on those and create new sentences with those same words so that they get multiple reviews. Here is an example of a Spot the Sparkle poster. These would be printed out on cardstock or laminated and hung up in a classroom. The word cluttered here is in one of the Blitz stories, and in the word cloud you have synonyms for the word. And there's an add-on lesson plan to teach you how to teach the kids how to play this game so that they can get multiple exposures to it. Here are the writing organizers. They start with the picture boxes and then rough draft, and then a final draft and a writing check so they can go through all the steps needed. Here's an example of the take-home activities, level A, and there's level B. Here are the sequencing cards. They're with or without the icons. And here's the Story Champs storybooks. And in these, you would print them out, have the kids draw pictures, either dictate or write their own stories. And then you cut them and put them in a book. All right, to wrap this up, I just want to go through the procedures of how you go about selecting a story and a lesson. All right, first of all, you need to identify the arrangement. You probably know, are you going to deliver your lesson to a large group, a small group, or one-on-one? You need to know that. The second thing you need to do is use your assessment data to identify what targets you want to teach. There are 4 levels and 4 types of targets that you have to select. You absolutely have to determine a story structure. Is it going to be basic, enhanced, enhanced plus, or advanced with level J? Have to choose that. You also need to choose your genre and task targets. Are you going to be teaching retells and personal stories, fictional stories, informational passages, and then story and information writing? Okay, so you have to combine the first one with one of the second ones. Then you can also add in linguistic targets like causal connections, temporal connections, and modifiers. And then there are 4 types of vocabulary targets if you want to add one of those to one of your basic lessons. So there you can do classic explicit vocabulary, blitz explicit vocabulary. Those are the words that do not have context to support them. And then there's the blitz contextual support, sparkle vocabulary. And then you can also teach new terms with the information passages. The next thing you need is identify a specific master lesson plan and or the add-on that addresses the targets of interest. Keep in mind there are 57 master lesson plans and 8 add-on lessons. While that seems overwhelming, the idea is to make sure that we have enough flexibility to work for kids who are preschool all the way to 3rd grade, and for all the different arrangements like large group, small group, and individual. So it's a very flexible curriculum, and the manualized parts are right in the master lesson plans. Those are the parts we don't want you to change, but that's why we've created so many lesson plans for you to choose from. The other thing that's important about it is the master lesson plans are not designed to go in order, okay? Although they are somewhat sequential. You might have a group of students who you choose this lesson plan 26, and that's the one you use with them for the next 10 sessions. But at the point in time that their assessment data are saying that they're making improvements, you might need to move on to another lesson, and you may add on vocabulary or address language complexity or move to writing. So that's why there's lots of flexibility in the choice and the selection of what lesson plan you choose. Then, of course, once you've gotten that far, you just need to pick out a story. And remember, there are 24 total stories, and there are 10 levels of sophistication. The classic stories only have 2 levels of sophistication, A and B, but the blitz stories have all 10 from A to I. Okay, that's all I got for you on the materials. Good luck.